The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. We're looking forward to a great discussion regarding e-procurement software and technology and what it could mean for you and your organization. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is muted currently who's attending. If you have any questions, there is a question box. So you can enter your questions at any time, and we're hoping to leave some room at the end of our discussion today to answer any questions that you may have. So my name is Amanda Balla, and I am a programs manager with Bonfire. Today, we are lucky to have Carrie Warnick, programs coordinator for Region 10 Education Service Center, on the line with us. Carrie has brought her entire bid process entirely online, and we'll have the opportunity to hear from Carrie about what it was like making that change. We'll be sure to leave time, as I said, at the end for any questions, and we really just want to help you answer any questions that you might have about eSourcing and how to make the best choice if you are currently evaluating sourcing or procurement technology. So welcome, Carrie. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So before we dive in, we wanted to provide just a very quick background of Bonfire and how it helps procurement teams. So Bonfire is a strategic sourcing platform that empowers procurement teams and stakeholders to come together to make better purchasing decisions. It is one of the fastest growing strategic sourcing platforms on the market, and our clients come from a variety of organizations with a very strong public sector presence. The Bonfire team works hand in hand with procurement teams to help them realize the full potential of their e-sourcing investment. Everything from simple bids to RFP, Bonfire provides a purpose-built and easy-to-use solution that adapts to your changing need. And we're also really excited to announce that we are now available through a cooperative contract with the Texas DIR. Through this contract, teams can save money by leveraging volume buying power to access discounted pricing, save time by avoiding the lengthy RFX process and using the DIR's competitively bid contract, and make a confident decision with a well-vetted contract that's guaranteed to comply with state purchasing requirements. So now that you have a bit of background, let's take a look at the topics that we'll be covering today. We'll take a look at the current landscape, both of e-sourcing and the idea of digitization. Carrie will walk us through the before and after of e-sourcing. We'll look at challenges, needs, walk through software selection and the actual implementation process. And then we'll see some of the benefits of implementing this process, how to get started, and then, as I mentioned, we'll answer some questions that you may have. Digital transformation is a really hot topic currently in procurement. It's become a bit of one of those buzzwords, but teams really are recognizing the crucial role that technology plays in meeting strategic objectives. Modern procurement tech empowers teams to be more efficient and deliver more value, which obviously has key benefits for both the organization as a whole, as well as procurement professionals. We're seeing more and more teams are feeling that it's imperative to get on the path to digitizing their procurement function. So no matter where you're at, whether you're still using a paper-based process that you're looking to get off of, or getting started with electronic submissions, or if you already have some tools in place but are looking to leverage more data, whatever the case may be, you really are in good company. Many procurement teams are either preparing to, in the midst of, or are introducing technology into their current process. And a couple key stats that we find really interesting to keep in mind as we go through today's discussion. 40% of procurement teams say that their staff is overstretched or overworked. I'm sure a lot of you on the line today resonates with you. Only 7% of procurement leaders report substantial digitization of procurement function. So although it is a hot topic, a lot of individuals have not had the chance to necessarily implement it as of yet. And 60% of procurement teams have no tools or rely on improvised manual processes for procurement workflows. Carrie, how do you feel about those stats? Do those resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw myself, a couple of years ago in that very place, being the lower percentile, struggling with paper bids.
Right. So in your personal experience, can you start off by telling us a little bit about your position with Region 10 and kind of, your main focus and types of bids or RFPs that you run.
Okay, sure. So I am the program coordinator for Multi-Region Purchasing Co-op, which is a child nutrition food purchasing co-op housed out of Region 10 Education Service Center in the Richardson, Texas area. And my main job is bid procurement on behalf of 250 school districts in the area. I do a total of 13 requests for proposals, RFPs, every year. Some get renewed and some are new, just depends on where we are in that term for the contract. And mainly food products, but I do have some food service, non-food bids, chemicals and cleaning, sanitation systems, small wares, things like that. Some of my bids are simple, others are very complex, just based on the size of my co-op. I am a very large co-op in the state, so that always makes it interesting.
Right. It definitely sounds like there is a lot involved, and especially likely when it comes to those complex bids too. Could you walk us through what your process was like prior to introducing eSourcing?
Sure, it was cumbersome at best. I have used another software system that I only ran 2 different bids through, and it was only to gather pricing. So I did my largest commodity bid as well as my commercial food bid through this other software. And they did not have the ability to electronically upload documents. It was simply a bid table, as you will call it, to capture bid pricing. Everything else was done through Excel spreadsheets or Word document forms, all on paper. And the vendors, when they bid the pricing, they entered that into the software system, but then they had to mail in through FedEx or UPS or whatever route they chose their bid proposal. The other 11 bids that did not go into that software were all done manually through Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. And those would be, downloadable off of our multi-region website and then mailed in. It was heavy. It was very time consuming. And both myself and my secretary spent hours scanning in the received bids and organizing them into our server. It just was cumbersome and a lot of room for human error.
Definitely. And so in this process, which you describe as cumbersome, what was the evaluation process like once you actually got all those documents finally into the system?
I would describe it as like herding cats. So, before Bonfire, I had a very difficult time getting some of my co-op members to participate on an evaluation committee. That was my first stumbling block, just to get anyone to participate. And with an evaluation, you're having to share documents that at the time they're being shared are confidential. So there was the passing back and forth of a confidentiality statement to the members to sign off on, and then sharing with them pricing or other documents to be reviewed for the evaluation process. And then they received via email a copy of our evaluation criteria, which they had to fill out. And then they had to physically sign that. So they would print it out, sign it, and then scan it back in, send it to me as a PDF. But you can well imagine receiving a handful of PDFs with scores for 8 different criteria questions, and then having to organize those into one report and come up with an overall score. It was a nightmare, really. That's how I describe it. And not a huge amount of participation from my co-op.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's a lot of steps involved and a lot of time and effort, both for you and for the evaluators, of course. We often hear about these types of multi-step processes from prospective clients. Rather than relying on manual spreadsheets, emails, and shared drives, what we at Bonfire do is really help users centralize the process in one place and more easily manage strategic, complex RFPs and bid evaluations. Proposal documents can be released to only relevant evaluators to review and score all within the browser so that you're not getting that sending them out and then rescanning them back in. And when larger amounts of qualitative information need to be collected and reviewed, there are a number of built-in tools that make it easy to compare responses side by side, which is also a really nice feature. So now looking at, once you started down the path of eSourcing with Bonfire, Carrie, what did that kind of transform the process into, and what is your process like now?
It's amazing, I will be honest. It completely streamlined everything in regard to my bids. And just as far as the evaluation committees, so what I've seen since using Bonfire for the past 2 years is not only an increased level of participation, because it is so easy for evaluators to log in. They're taken right to the source for criteria questions. They score right there in the system, and then they submit it. And even my least technology savvy districts have found an easy time using the software, which makes it really nice. And I typically set up anywhere from 2 to 3 different committees. And there are it's a tiered situation within Bonfire, which is another thing that I like about Bonfire, is that I can set up these 3 different committees. They each have a different task, different things to evaluate, and I can release the evaluation documents when I'm ready to release them. So stage 1 for me is a pass-fail. Did we receive all the requested documents as was required for part of the proposal? And typically my secretary is on that committee, and she will download everything submitted, check it for accuracy, and then give a pass-fail, because you can set up evaluation committees on a pass-fail or based on a score. And it could be a numeric score, or it also could be a range, like a evaluate scoring of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. So that's the stage 1. Then I have a stage 2 evaluation committee, which is the pricing evaluation. And I typically do that because that is based on a mathematic equation. It's a formula that we use to determine low bid winner, second low bid winner. And then there's the third stage, which is your qualitative criteria. And that's where my member districts step in, and they answer 6 different criteria questions and provide a score. Typically they're given a short amount of time, but they get reminders from the system. Hey, you need to finish up your evaluation, which I also love about this program. So that's the evaluation piece. But what I really like as well is that with Bonfire, everything is electronic and right there online. The vendors receive notifications. I can invite from within Bonfire. I can just post it on my website. They can click on the link and step right into my portal to look at the bid documents, download and submit their pricing proposals, and then upload the required documents. So it's just a great one-stop shop place. And then of course the bid tables, which I love, because this was really the main thing that sold me on Bonfire. And I know we're getting to that later, but the bid tables really allow a lot of flexibility. So when you open up that bid and you're looking at pricing submitted, there are different ways you can analyze the information received. So you can look at lowest price for each individual item that you specified. You can pull items out into a market basket, which I do use a lot, so you get a really nice comparison of apples to apples. And then of course you can analyze the extended pricing, because we all know that there's so many different ways to look at data, and different angles will produce different results. And what I mean is that you can look at a single case price for a set number of products and get a total amount, and then you can step over and look at your extended quantities and get a completely different picture of actually who is the low bid winner. Because if you're just gonna buy one case, that could produce one number, but then extended quantities may flip and produce another low bid winner. So it's really important to have that flexibility in the bid tables. It's helped me tremendously, and it's also helped avoid some of the human error piece that comes into trying to manually look at all that data at once.
Right, we hear a lot about that, the risk of human error, because it does happen when you're using an Excel spreadsheet, just having one line off can kind of change the outcome of everything. So touching on those challenges and this idea of a manual or even an only partially online process, these are some of the key ones that we often run into and hear from clients or prospective clients. There are very admin-heavy processes tend to lead to long cycle times and, as we said, that increased risk of errors. Also, when there's siloed information, it makes it difficult to really see the whole picture. And participating in the procurement process is often cumbersome for stakeholders, and procurement is really often viewed as an obstacle. So we hear a lot that once people bring their process online, they feel that they can be more of a strategic partner to stakeholders rather than being viewed as that red tape or an obstacle. Carrie, we're sure that some of these challenges are very familiar, as you've touched on. And so what were the 3 or 4 key challenges that you really wanted to solve for when you went out looking for a new system?
Sure, yes. And, all the challenges you mentioned, I definitely was experiencing. Some of my larger, most complex bids, it was difficult to compare apples to apples. I had these complex situations where not only do I have several items that are specified, but I've got multiple pricing regions. Because I am so large, some of my bids have several different areas that groups districts together. And so trying to just look at the apples to apples pricing, figuring out really what is the best value for each of those pricing regions was extremely labor intensive. And like you mentioned, that risk for human error. I am happy to say that I have not made a lot of human errors in all of that, but it created very long hours and looking at the data just over and over to ensure that I was getting it right and was I looking at things correctly. And I've got some spreadsheets that would just probably make you want to pass out. Honestly, could span 3 monitors and you probably would still not see everything. So going electronic and having everything online and built-in functions and analyses just made it so much easier and so much less time and reassuring that I wasn't going to make that mistake and maybe I failed to remove a certain number of products that weren't matching up across all vendors and all pricing regions. So it's been a huge benefit not having to worry about that.
Great. Probably able to sleep better at night knowing that you aren't having to go through and comb through all of those spreadsheets just to make sure that there aren't any errors in it.
Absolutely.
So in terms of those key challenges and all of that time that you were spending, what really was the catalyst and what really made you feel comfortable and begin to want to look for software that could better meet your needs?
So for many years, I've been a paper-free desk as much as possible. And, with a large co-op, when you receive those bids in the mail, it is just stacks of paper. And then there's also the challenge of vendors getting the documents to you on time, relying on the mail. Mother Nature kicks in, and now a vendor can't get to the post office to get their bid mailed off, and now you've got to, push your due date out. So it just, little headaches along the way. And I really wanted to go paper-free. I wanted to receive all the required documents electronically. Just main reason is that it took off the table the amount of time my secretary stood around scanning documents in, getting them organized, and it took off the table the risk of something not getting scanned in or getting scanned in and put in the wrong folder. The list of places where you can make a mistake or misplace something are huge. And so I had a really big drive to go fully electronic and not receive paper bids, not receive all these stacks of paper. And actually right now, my service center and my department, we have hired a company to come in, and all the older documents we've held on to for the past 5 years because of record retention, we are now digitally creating those on a server situation through a company. So finally, the service center is stepping up to the plate for everything online. So that was probably my biggest desire. And the other software company that I had used in the past did not offer that, or they did offer it, but it was going to cost extra. So, and they were already expensive. So we were not trying to increase our cost by any means, but at the same time, had a real need to have this become electronic. The other part was just, having it organized, and in Bonfire, when you collect those documents from vendors, you're driving the ship basically of how they upload them and what format and how those documents are titled. And when you open that bid and download those documents, they automatically get placed into folders on your server titled exactly how you set it up in the system. So there is no worry that that document went missing in another folder or didn't get scanned in because the scanner pulled two sheets through together. So all those little places where errors could occur are off the table now, because it's just a clean transaction. Documents get uploaded how you want it. They get downloaded the same way. It's all completely organized, which then lends much easier time for transparency, because now you've got this organizational thing in place and you can put that on a Google Drive or on your website. Members can find the documents very easily. It all makes sense, and it's so much easier.
Right, I'm sure those key challenges are probably common to a lot of you on the line joining us today. Those are common challenges and issues that we do often hear about. And what we really find and always cancel people on is that it's very important to actually identify those key challenges when looking for software. And you really want to make sure that you're asking the big picture question of, how will technology help solve X challenge or help your team deliver more value? We really recommend asking that question rather than simply looking at it in a more operational manner and saying, I want a system that can do X. From there, you'll want to look at your current situation and ask yourself, what do I have right now and what is missing? And you really want to focus on how effective your current processes are when you're evaluating them, what you can do to achieve better outcomes in the future, review how well the existing IT environment supports your goals, and then really look and identify where those gaps are. So, Carrie, can you walk us through the process of how you evaluated your software options and kind of why you decided to go with Bonfire in the end?
Sure. So I had been looking for about 3 to 4 years before grabbing Bonfire, and I'd looked at a total of 5 eBid options. And while I was using a current system, as I mentioned, they did not offer, or they did offer at extra cost, the ability to upload documents electronically by the bidders. A couple of other systems just were not ready for the complexity of some of my bids. And when I talk about complexity, for example, I have a milk bid and it has 18 pricing regions. I span 10 service center regions in the north central part of Texas, and I do county clusters for the milk bid. So a few of the systems just weren't ready for that, and a couple of them tried to take that square peg and stick it in the round hole of their system, and it was just really clunky and not as user friendly. I did step into a couple different software systems and just did not find them as easy to use. And so miraculously, Bonfire came along and asked for my biggest challenge, and I had to share that if I could find a system to handle this milk bid with 18 pricing regions, you've got me. And so I did. I sent it over to Kyle, who was at the time my go-to guy. And I think it was less than 24 hours the next day, he contacted me. He said, I've got this bid set up in a bid table. And I was amazed. So we walked through it and it was amazing. And what I really liked about this whole situation is that it was a spreadsheet. It started as my Excel spreadsheet, which I've had in place for years, and it just simply got uploaded into the Bonfire system as it was. I did not have to make a lot of changes, and tag items with various item or class numbers and fit my bid table into their system, meaning in the way they wanted it. I got to decide I want it to look this way, and it gets uploaded and it still looks that way. I didn't have to do anything special to fit into a system, someone else's idea of what it should look like. And that was a really big selling point for me. Everyone has their own way of doing things, their own organizational approach to a bid table. And I'm sure mine look very different from someone else's, but it works for me and how I can understand it easily and separate all the data. So that was probably the one thing that sold me on Bonfire. And when he showed me that, I said, come and see me. We need to talk. And it was very shortly thereafter that they came and visited me at the service center, and we bought the system. I had to have it.
That's fantastic. That offers a really great insight, I think, as well into that idea of still being able to use your own process and what works for you, and then adding in that level of digitization rather than having to flip your entire process, or as you said, change it in to match the way someone else would do it. So I think that's some great insight there as well. So there are obviously a number of modules available within Bonfire. Carrie, which ones are you currently using, and what are you using those for on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, sure. So when we first purchased Bonfire at the service center, we only purchased the projects module because at that time, I thought that was the solution to my problem, is that I wanted the ability to easily set up a complex bid table, and I wanted to be fully electronic, and that's exactly what the projects module did for me, along with a few other things that I didn't even know I needed, like the templates, which are phenomenal. And so that was the first year, but before the first year was even done, I got introduced into the contract management piece, and also, I think at the time, the vendor performance was forthcoming, but I got a little preview of it. And so we immediately decided we need all of it. And even in that first year, we decided to go ahead and buy the full package. So I've got the projects module, contract management module, along with the vendor performance part. And we did a 5-year purchase plan because I don't see this going anywhere but forward with Bonfire. And the first year I did, it took me several months to kind of work through that projects and didn't really touch much on the contract management side. And in the second year, I did get all my contracts in, but it was still a lot of work just because I'm so large. At that last year, I had 130 vendors awarded, and I was still somewhat of a one-person show. And so just the entering of information and getting that started took a little time. And I've now hired a part-time contract management specialist who will be handling this piece of it. And I have not used the vendor performance yet. This is the year we're going to do 2 vendor performance reviews, a mid-year and then an end of the year. And that way we can provide our vendors with basically a mid-year report card. Hey, here's how the participating members say you're doing. And then an end of the year report card, which I'm pretty excited about that because that will just help with future bid awards. So I'm looking forward to that. And my new guy will be handling that piece as well.
Great. That's awesome that you've been able to implement this as well as, adding to your team, which is, I'm sure, allowing you to be more strategic with this idea of really looking at the vendor report cards and things like that. So that's really, really great to see that you're actually looking at more data and more information than you ever had before. It's fantastic.
Oh, it's huge. Yes. This is very exciting.
So speaking of this idea of implementation, when it comes to implementation, we find that there's often a concern from procurement leaders with this idea of introducing technology. And also those individuals who are going to be expected to use it are also sometimes a little bit concerned as well. The fact is, and this looks like a bit of a scary statistic, but the fact is that around 70% of technology projects fail to deliver on the desired results. Probably those of you who are joining us today can recall one or two examples of software implementations that did not go as planned, whether it was a very long implementation with delay after delay, or if users ended up coming up with their own workarounds because it wasn't working the way that it should or didn't serve their needs and solve their key challenges, or if people just frankly didn't like it. For end users, that's definitely a source of annoyance or frustration, but for leaders, there's really a lot at stake here. You're failing to realize efficiencies or other benefits, the return on the investment goes unrealized, there's also poor optics, and it impacts the team's ability to deliver against those strategic objectives. So this is one of those key areas to ensure that you are choosing the software that's right for you and that you have a really strong implementation plan. You really do need to ensure that you'll have support and help from a success team that can ensure everything runs smoothly, at your pace, and in a way that works for your team, your stakeholders, and your evaluators. Otherwise, you run the risk of this poor implementation and the software technology you worked so hard to introduce not being used in the most efficient way possible or not being used at all. Carrie, what was your implementation process like? I know you said you went a little bit more slowly just because of the size that you were being asked to manage. But overall, was it this kind of daunting task, or did you find it a bit of more of a seamless transition?
No, it actually was not too bad at all. I did sort of start slow. When we purchased the software, I was in the middle of a very large commodity bid, and I just couldn't get started right away. But I stepped in and created a template a few months later, and that first year, I think I ran 6 or 7 new bids through Bonfire. And I'm not going to say I was perfect with everything, because each time I go in and I set up a project, I've learned something from the previous year or the previous project and have been able to better streamline even how I'm using Bonfire. But it's very user friendly, great training videos and online help. And anytime I was really stuck, I just shot an email over to my customer service rep at Bonfire and got a very quick answer back, or even a phone call. So the support side has been just super with that. And I didn't really have a lot of questions, but sometimes just get stuck. And it was just nice to know that I wasn't going to have to wait for days to get a call back or an answer back. But the online situation for videos and help topics is really amazing as well. So
great, that's always fantastic to hear.
Yeah, and we've got a new department at the service center that is now going to be using Bonfire, and they are calling on me this week, and I'm going to help them get a project set up to be released this coming, I think, Friday or next Monday. So that's kind of exciting as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great to hear. So,
but it was very easy to get started, I will say that.
Great. So in addition to implementing a new process within your team or department, there are also others to think about, of course, such as vendors and evaluators. We know there are often concerns over how vendors will react to a new process, and especially this idea of introducing technology. Sometimes people are a bit hesitant because they're worried about what their vendors would think. Carrie, how did your vendors react? Was there anything specific you did prior to the introduction to really get them on board and make them feel comfortable?
Yes, I did, and I will be doing it again this year. So with the first bid in Bonfire, I always hold a pre-bid conference for the bidders, and we had Bonfire do a webinar demo of, from a vendor standpoint, how to get set up, registered with a login, and then how to access through my portal the bid documents, how to download the bid table, enter pricing proposals, and then how to upload everything and submit. So they got a complete walkthrough. And then they were shown where to find help videos, which I'm sure some of them ended up using. I've not had one complaint about the process. And in fact, I've heard really great feedback from my vendors. They really appreciate the fact that we went to fully electronic situation, that they no longer have to mail something in. They also like the fact that I am telling them, hey, I want this document as a PDF, and they'll upload. If they try to upload it as an Excel, they are told no by the system, wrong format. So the system has built-in checks and balances to keep them in check, that they are submitting correctly. And then of course they can't submit until they've satisfied all the requirements of my solicitation for certifications and documents and all that good fun stuff. The other piece that I like, and I think that the vendors really like as well, is the built-in question and answer through messages. So if they've got a question, they submit it through Bonfire, I get notified. It's just so streamlined. I then log in and I answer their question. The minute I hit submit, not only do they receive the email that their question has been answered, but everyone else who has logged in and looked at or taken any of my solicitation documents also receives a notification via email of the question asked and my answer. And it's also the same if I wanted to do a public announcement. I can shoot out a message to everyone that stepped into my solicitation. And that has saved a huge amount of time as well, because we were doing that manually back and forth and mailing everyone with, you know, emails with updated documents on the website, which was cumbersome.
Definitely. And one of the interesting things that we often hear as well is, although there's concern about moving to an online process, vendors are actually beginning more and more to expect that as really everything becomes more digital. So we're finding more and more that while it's a concern from some procurement leaders, it's not necessarily a concern on the part of the vendors themselves. So it's great to hear you say that they had such a good reaction to it as well. And
yes,
in addition to vendors, we also hear, about questions about how evaluators and stakeholders will react, and if they'll find adapting to a new process difficult. The truth is that, of course, everyone resists change naturally. Everyone's busy and doesn't want additional work. And there's, of course, this fear of the unknown, especially when it comes to training and if they feel as though, again, that their entire process is going to change. Carrie, in terms of evaluators, what was that like, and how did you navigate around those potentially negative feelings and sentiments?
so I think just, as I explained previously, that back and forth with documents, and that was just busy work for them. And I think with the Bonfire system, it's so easy. They just log in. They can, sign off or answer to an agreement, a confidentiality agreement, and then they step into the criteria and they just score very quickly. So I think it's really made it seamless for them and not as cumbersome, having to receive documents, print them, scan them back in, everything that was involved previously to that. And I have seen improved participation. I think also as procurement reviews become more intense, schools have a greater desire to be more involved with this part of the process with their co-ops. And so I think there's that desire to be involved, and Bonfire makes it so easy. But we did an online webinar training to those that were evaluating to show them how it worked and how easy it was to log in and answer the criteria and submit. And we will continue to do that each year. So it's just a matter of, showing them the example and walking them through the process. But it has definitely improved my evaluation committees, I will say that. And no one really had any trouble in the system, so it's worked out very well.
Great, that's fantastic to hear. Did you receive any feedback directly from evaluators on the process? Have any of them commented on ease of use or how they're feeling as an evaluator?
I have definitely had comments back on that was really easy, and I've seen them want to participate more in different, with different vendors. Some were a little shy, just one vendor just wanted to evaluate one bid, and now I've got more that want to participate on multiple bids. So that's a nice thing.
That's fantastic. So we often hear that people, they do have their own day job, so it's hard to always include them and get them excited about the evaluation process. And they really are a key part of the stakeholder community. So of course you want to ensure that you're making things as simple and is easy for them, and really using their time effectively. And as I mentioned, sometimes for them, participating in the procurement process is just one item on a very long to-do list. We actually publish a yearly report where we pull key RFP stats and including a section that focuses on just evaluation. And looking at the data, we actually saw some interesting patterns in when evaluators are doing their scoring. So we saw that 10% of scores occur on the day right before the deadline. As I mentioned, evaluators are frequently busy doing their own full-time job and don't get around to doing their scoring until the very last minute. So that means that they really do need an easy and efficient way to do their evaluations. We also noted that 27% of scoring happens outside of core working hours. And an online platform really makes it easy for those evaluators to complete their scoring where and when they can. There's also this idea of confidentiality. If they're bringing home paper proposals with them, of course, that could be left somewhere, they could be lost, fall into the wrong hands. But on a software platform, you don't have to worry about that as much. They can be mobile while ensuring confidential documents that are password protected and really secure. What we found when we're talking with clients is that in all cases, it's really about change management. As I mentioned, change can be scary for people. There's this fear of the unknown, but really showing how the benefits will outweigh any temporary discomfort can be very beneficial in driving adoption. Highlighting the impact on team members' daily working lives is one way to encourage adoption. Framing the reasons why your evaluators are using the tool is often beneficial. And rather than highlighting that you purchased the tool to simply improve efficiencies in evaluations, you can use examples like this will save us 3 hours during consensus meetings. That sort of information usually resonates better with individuals. And speaking of benefits, Carrie, you've walked us through and mentioned some of these, but what has the introduction of Bonfire really meant for you?
So I'd have to say that just the increased efficiency in handling all of my RFPs has allowed me to grow the co-op and meet some of the higher demands of the co-op. So that streamlined process really, it's shaved hours of work off of my work week. And that's huge. I had not taken a spring break vacation in years, and I did that first year of using Bonfire, so that was pretty exciting. These little small things you don't realize, you just take for granted. I'm going to work 110 hours during spring break. This is how it goes. That didn't exist once Bonfire came into my life because things can move so much more efficiently using templates and not having to do all the manual calculations and analyses because the program does it for you. That was just huge for me. The other thing I like, there are several reports that you can download out of Bonfire once you've gone through and finished your evaluation piece. And that's great transparency reporting to not only your districts, all your stakeholders, you got to report to your executive directors and board of directors. Just give some really nice overview of everything that you did, and every document that was created is right there at your fingertips and easily accessed through the Bonfire program. So I really liked that part of it. And it just goes back to the efficiencies that are created within using this, this software.
Fantastic. It's always nice to hear how the software is actually benefiting teams and the positives that they're getting out of it. We've also found that teams who have moved to digitizing the process have very similar benefits to the ones that you just walked us through, Carrie. We've put some up on the screen for those joining us today. There is that efficiency that you spoke about, less time on manual routine tasks. You can get more done in the same amount of time, and really reducing the administrative tasks through automation so that your time can be better spent on being more strategic and adding more value. It's also this idea of greater visibility and transparency, knowing where you stand and what's coming up next, and better understand not just time, but where money's going and the impact it has on the organization, whether you're from a municipality, a school district, or a higher education institution. You're also able to better service stakeholders, which is fantastic. It's easier for vendors to do business with you often. easier for internal departments to interact with procurement, as we touched on before, not being an obstacle and part of that red tape. We've really found that the right technology support can really be a force multiplier for procurement teams. So in terms of getting started, Carrie, what would you recommend to those joining us today who are interested in getting started in some sort of digitizing the process or introducing a type of software?
So I think first just identifying, what are your biggest challenges with your, your projects, your bids. And for me, it was better to start a little more slowly and just do one bid the first time, just to get a feel for the program, how it works and functions, and seeing what you get in the way of documents in different folders once you download the information, how the bid table lays out, because you're going to tweak as you go along, just learning the program. And it wasn't difficult to learn the program. I think it's just, going from a complete manual system into a digitized system. You want to get used to it, basically. I think also attending the user meetups, if you have that option, or just talking to colleagues in the industry that are already using the Bonfire program. I know that when this new department at the service center reached out to me to learn a little more about Bonfire because they had an interest in using it, to hear me talk about how, I get excited when I talk about Bonfire because it's done so much for me that they got equally excited, and they're so excited to use it and can't wait to jump in. So I think just connecting with colleagues, that are using the program already, and explaining how easy it is to use and how much benefit you receive from this, that's probably a good start.
It's definitely always nice to hear from people, I think, using the platform themselves. It's always beneficial to see what actual users really think.
Absolutely.
And so when we're looking at recommending what people should look for, we echo a lot of those key items that you just ran through, Carrie. Some other questions that you should really ask yourself, no matter what it is that you're looking to implement, is, will stakeholders, so your buying team, evaluators, vendors, be able to use this? Is this something that's easy for them to use? Is it designed to make users' lives easier? So is it actually a platform that is simple to adopt, easy to use? Will stakeholders benefit from the value that's going to be generated from the software? And as you alluded to before, Carrie, does the platform try to fit a square peg in a round hole, or is it actually a fit? I think another important item to look at is that idea of training and support. Is there actually someone there that you can reach out to, a live person who can walk you through things if you do find yourself confused or having a question? And are you receiving personalized instruction that matches your business practice? Or are you just being provided with only self-service tools to be successful? So that brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. We did want to, as I said, leave some time for questions. So if you do have any questions, you can start putting them into the chat box if you haven't yet already. We do have a couple that we'll start off with here. So Carrie, the first question we have is, what was the length of your implementation process from purchase to first use? So I know that you said you did have a bit of a slower implementation just based on your own schedule. So still, I guess, just tell us what the length of that was.
Sure. So we purchased the software in October, and I first used it in March of that very next following year. And the only reason for that delay is that in October and November, I'm pulling together a commodity bid, and I wasn't ready to learn a new software program right in the middle of creating the bid. And I'm sort of tied to another software with my commodity bid. So that was also kind of the reason why I waited. But I tend to jump into the deep end to learn how to swim. And so literally in February, I dove into Bonfire, started poking around the projects module, what I needed to do, uploaded documents, took those off, uploaded because I just didn't feel like things were right, and released my first bid in March. So it really was not a huge window of time from learning what I needed to do to, releasing that first bid. It went pretty quickly.
Great. So another question that we have is, what was the most difficult part of getting into eSourcing and introducing software?
I think, well, the most difficult was finding a system that worked for what I needed. That was the most difficult challenge. And that took a good 2 years from looking at some of the first, different systems. Talking my service center into it was a piece of cake. So I was so excited about Bonfire, and our business office was given the demonstration at the same time I was. And I'm a pretty good salesperson, so got them excited, and that was not a challenge at all. So really didn't have a lot of obstacles. And then we were just so sold on how the projects module performed that it was not even a question as to whether we wanted the contract management and vendor performance piece. It was just, what's it going to cost to get it? And it was a very nice package deal. So
Right.
That was a good thing.
It's always a nice question to be asked. Just get it, right?
Yes. Now, what I will say, we didn't talk about in the presentation, but the nice thing about Bonfire is that, we pay that subscription fee on an annual basis. But if I want to do 1 bid or 1,000 bids through my portal, that's what I do. There is no hidden fee. There is no per bid fee, which I do have that challenge with another software that I use. So that's a very nice setup, that you pay the price, your annual fee, and then you do what you want to do.
Awesome. So another question, and this actually leads well to, you were talking about convincing your service center, is how did you convince your organization of the need for software and eSourcing, I'm guessing?
Sure. So, they were fully aware of the number of RFPs running through my co-op on an annual basis, and the fact that some were very involved. And the business office at that time was very involved, and our CFO sort of oversaw every bid that I was releasing and managed all the Q&A. It was a very tedious process, a lot of back and forth, sharing documents, uploading this, downloading that. And I think she saw during that presentation the true benefit of just a complete streamlined process of everything online, received electronically. And it really was not a hard sell. It really was not. The only sad piece about that is that through Region 10 Service Center, she keeps wanting to use it for the Region 10 bids, which are not as many as just what I do alone in the co-op. And she's so busy, she hasn't had time to learn. That part of this.
There's always that part, right?
Yes.
And so we have the final question here is really just, what is your advice for those who are starting to look into software and eSourcing and introducing more of a digital process?
So like I said, I think first outlining, what are your challenges? What do you need the software to do for you? Do you need it, to create templates so that you can very quickly create projects out of one template? Are you needing to go paperless, fully electronic? And how does that look? What does that look like? What do your bid tables look like? How are you collecting pricing? Is it complex? Is it a simple bid? And once you get that understanding of what are your top 3, these I gotta have, the software has to do this for me. Then when you start looking at different software systems, some are gonna really stand out, like Bonfire, and others are gonna be like, fell short here or it fell short there. And then when you start looking at cost, obviously that's a factor. I looked at one that was free. I just had to participate through a marketing situation on a weekly or monthly basis, but they weren't ready with building some specifications and utilizing their bid table. Another one, it was the square peg in a round hole. They could sort of force it to work with my complex multiple pricing regions, but it was going to be clunky. And if I'm going to pay that money, and their cost was nothing more than Bonfire, really nothing less, but it wasn't as streamlined and as easy. I was going to have to sort of force it to work in a way that it really wasn't built to work. And so I think understanding your needs first, and then looking at the different systems to see what's offered, how easy do my needs fit into the system, or does the system fit my needs, and then cost. You know, I mean, another software I use, it's per bid. The cost I pay is per bid. And I will say right now, if I use that software fully, I would be spending over $100,000 a year running my bids through a software system that really doesn't even do the electronic upload of documents. Whereas, trust me, I'm not spending that much with Bonfire. So yeah, I'd have to say that would be the best approach.
Great. We have had one final question come in here that we'll try to answer in the couple minutes we have. So did Bonfire help you reach more vendors or new vendors, Carrie?
I would say it definitely made it easier to reach the vendors, and I have definitely seen new vendors step up to the plate, because in the system, you know, with your projects, you can apply your commodity codes. And I'm not fully informed on how that all works in Bonfire, but I do know if the commodity codes are attached to your projects, that other vendors can see what's available out there without even logging into your portal. They might see that you've got a bid released. And oddly enough, there are some other e-systems out there that see what's going on in Bonfire. And I had a vendor that received a notification from a completely other e-bid system saying, hey, you might look at this. This might be something you want to, you know, submit on. And they were way off. It was nothing he would ever want to submit a bid on. He's a customer. And I told him, I would let you know if there's something available in my co-op. But I found that very interesting. I think it has to do with the commodity codes, and you might answer to that, Amanda. I don't know. It's just, but yes, I have seen new bidders step up, companies that I was like, oh, where have you been? Because we all know we have to legally advertise, publish it in the paper, but who looks at the paper anymore, really? You know, it's all electronic out there, and that's the key.
Yeah, we've definitely heard from a number of customers who were just, you know, advertising on their website that they had these certain bids, but so it was the same vendors who knew to go to that site to bid on the RFP, and so they would continually have those, whereas, as you said, vendors logging into the system or being kind of nudged by the system based on those commodity codes that these RFPs are available definitely opens up the playing field a bit. And we hear commonly that people are really getting those new vendors in, which is fantastic to hear.
Yes, and I like the fact that someone can see if I have a solicitation out there, you know, they don't have to log into my portal. They can see the projects that are available. Now, if they want to look at the documents and download them, yes, they need to log in. But at least I think they do. But I do like they can see what's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're pretty much out of time. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Carrie, for joining us today and sharing all of your knowledge and giving us a little bit of a taste of what introducing eSourcing has been like for you. Thanks for your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks also to everyone who joined us today. We hope that you got a lot of information. And if you have any additional questions that we weren't able to get to, definitely reach out and we can help you in your e-sourcing journey. So thanks again to everyone.
Thank you.